We have just had a crazy snowfall, and if you're watching this live when I'm filming it, you probably know what I'm talking about. There was a huge storm, and so many people have had their powers out for several days now. So we got hit with it, not quite as bad as everyone else, but definitely crazy storm, tons of snow, and also some really cold weather. And yet, I am still gardening. Picking the right plants is one of the 4 main reasons that I am able to successfully grow food in the winter. I checked, and the coldest temperature that we've had over the last couple weeks has been minus 18 Celsius. That's about minus 1 Fahrenheit. And yet I still have lots of food growing. So there's one exception that one of my plants that didn't actually survive or didn't do too well with that really cold snap that we had. But other than that, everything is done really well. So I'm going to tell you about that one plant that didn't do well, as well as 10 others that do very well in this cold temperature. All right, first up is Arugula. And Arugula, I talked about this in my video. I did a video not too long ago about what I like to do in January in the garden. And I talked about how much I love arugula, so I'm not going to go on about how much I love arugula again. But by far, it is my favorite winter vegetable to grow. It likes the cold temperatures, it tastes delicious in the winter, and it's just one of the easiest, it's one of the easiest leafy greens to grow in the winter that I find is harder to grow in the warm temperatures. So this is probably, this and kale, which I'll talk about in a minute, these are probably my 2 favorite things to grow in the winter. Next up is spinach, and even though I don't have a ton of spinach growing in my garden right now, the spinach that I do have is doing very well. Spinach is like a classic winter vegetable. It's one that will definitely handle the cold weather really, really well. The spinach that I have is really young, and one thing that you're going to notice with a lot of the different vegetables that I'm growing are that younger vegetables, younger leafy greens, they don't tend to suffer some of the same damage that larger, more mature plants will when the temperature drops a lot. So a lot of the plants in my greenhouse are quite young. Outside in my garden, they are not. I talked about this in other videos where I talked about my greenhouse. But generally, I would say that if you have a younger plant, then it's probably going to do a little bit better than the older ones. Next is mash, and mash is an interesting leafy green. It's actually one I'd never even heard about. I think the next couple that I'm going to show you, I had actually never even tried before I started growing my own food. But mash is one of those that I had never heard about until I started gardening. But if you do want to grow food in the winter, it is probably one of the easiest, most cold hardy greens to grow. I have grown it completely uncovered in the winter, and I have actually a whole video on mash where I showed how I picked it from underneath the snow, if you want to check that out. But I have mash in my garden, in my greenhouse right now, and it's doing excellent. It didn't even bat an eye from that really cold temperature that we had. And it is so good. It's really mild. It's, if you think about like an arugula has a little bit of peppery bite to it. Mash does not. Mash is a very mild green, so it's good if you want something just neutral and you don't want it to really interfere with the dish. It's definitely a favorite for my winter garden. And then there is Mizuna. Mizuna is another leafy green that I don't even think I had heard about it before. I still don't even see it. There was a 4-season farmer that was around me that I used to go to. They have since shut down. They don't longer. I think they're a flower farm now. But they had lots of really cool winter vegetables, but I never saw mash or Mizuna at their farm stand, which I thought was a little bit strange because they are pretty easy to grow. Maybe just because they're not popular. People don't really know of them. It's got a really nice mild taste to it. It's really nice. It's mild. It's almost a little bit sweet somehow. One of the things that I found most fascinating when I started to grow my own food, particularly in the colder temperatures, was how much sweeter vegetables get when they're subjected to cold temperatures. So as the temperature drops, leafy greens they lose some of that starch and they get more sugars. So things like kale. Kale is delicious right off the plant in the winter, but I wouldn't go near it in the summer, to be honest. It's not very good in the summer because it's just too warm. Like, it will grow, but it's just not very tasty. And I find that some of these winter greens, in particular, like that Mizuna, that was delicious. I would just snack on that as, I'd throw it in a salad or something like that, but it's just really good on its own. It's got a really nice taste. Then there is Claytonia, and Claytonia is an interesting one as well. It's one, I think it's the last one that I hadn't heard of before I started growing my own food. but it's a really interesting looking vegetable. You wouldn't even think that it's a vegetable almost when you first see it, because it's really unique looking. Mine are pretty young still, but when I'll find a picture or a clip or something of one that I had from my garden last year or the year before. But it's quite a beautiful flower, a beautiful plant, and it has these tiny little white flowers on it that it just makes any dish look so much more beautiful. And it's not super easy to find. I love edible flowers, and it's not super easy to find edible flowers in the colder months. There's lots in the warm months, but in the cold months I don't have a ton of them. So this is one that I absolutely love to throw into dishes just to make them a little bit more appealing. All right, now we are on to some of the more classic vegetables, the first of which is lettuce. Lettuce is also a funny one because some lettuce varieties are really good in the cold weather and some are not. I have actually 3 types of lettuce in my greenhouse right now. 2 of them I purposely put in here because they're really good varieties for the winter. But this red one, I didn't put this in here because I knew that it did well in the winter. I put it in here because I had a crazy amount of this lettuce. I let one of my plants go to seed last year just because it did so well. I'm like, oh, I need to save some of this seed. So I saved some lettuce seed from this red lettuce variety. But when you save seeds, you might notice that you don't get all of the seeds. Like, you don't just collect all of them. So lots of lettuce plants, or whatever seed it is you're saving, just appear everywhere. So I had a crazy amount of lettuce just popping up all over the place. I probably had like 100 heads of lettuce that just came. So I took a lot of them, I scattered them all over my garden. It's quite a pretty plant because it's purple. So I had a bunch of them, I took them into my greenhouse, and they actually did really well up until this cold snap. So I would say until it was like -10 Celsius, it did fine. Like, no problems whatsoever with the cold weather for that lettuce. Once it started to get colder, it didn't do well so well. So there's certain varieties of lettuce that actually do well in cold weather and some that do not. Inside of my garden planner, I list all this. I'll have a couple in the blog post as well if you want to check them out, but I usually just go to my garden planner, I just pull it up, and I just look up to see what kinds of varieties would be good, or even what kinds of plants in general do well in the cold weather. I will list the 2 varieties of winter hardy lettuce that I like to grow in the blog post if you want to check it out. But otherwise, yeah, it's good to know that some varieties of some plants have different characteristics, and lettuce is for sure one of those that, depending on which kind of lettuce you buy, some of them will do well in hot weather and some of them will do well in cold weather. So it's kind of tricky, but also pretty cool because that means that you can really extend and grow lettuce for a lot longer than if there was just one kind of lettuce, right? And then we move on to kale. Kale is probably, I think I mentioned this at the beginning, kale and arugula are probably my favorite kinds of vegetables to grow in the winter. Kale is so good in the winter. It's sweet. I can't even pick it because my kids will probably get mad at me, and we wait and wait and wait until the leaves grow large enough to bother eating them. And they're starting to get big enough now that they will definitely want to come out here and have a little nibble later. So I'm not going to have it, but kale is just delicious right off the plant. I'm definitely going to be putting more kale plants in my greenhouse and inside of my cold frames and hoop houses, like in my outdoor garden, because I don't just have a greenhouse, I also grow outdoors, like in my regular garden. I talked about that already in other videos, so I'm not going to go over that. But so I'm going to be putting kale out there, and I'm going to have kale in here, and hopefully we will have enough kale to satisfy this family next winter. But yeah, kale and arugula, probably if I could only pick 2 types of winter vegetables, it would probably be those. They're super cold hardy, they handle really, really low temperatures, and they are delicious at this time of the year. Absolutely delicious. Next up is Swiss chard, and if you've watched my other videos, you're probably sick of me talking about some of these same vegetables over and over and over, but Swiss chard is one of those, like, it does well in warm weather, it does well in cold weather, it's easy to take care of, it doesn't require a lot of maintenance, and it's healthy. It's beautiful. It's actually, like, if you buy these colorful varieties like this, it's actually quite a nice plant. Some people even put it in their front yard gardens just because it's like almost an ornamental plant. So I was very pleased to see that it handled those really cold temperatures that we just got. It didn't seem to be affected much at all. Some of the older leaves, like the really bigger leaves, they did suffer some damage from the frost. But generally, the plant is doing really well, and even some of the larger leaves did well, just not those really big ones at the bottom. I already trimmed them off, so I can't even show you what they look like, but they just had some, like, they were a little bit brown, they were a little bit discolored, and I took them right off, and now the plant is looking awesome. So, Swiss chard, still a favorite. Warm weather, cold weather, doesn't matter. I love Swiss chard. Alright, let's shift gears a little bit from the leafy greens, and I'm going to tell you about a couple others that are not leafy greens that also grow really well in the winter. The first is this, it's called a Egyptian walking onion. It's a type of perennial onion, so you don't plant it every year. It comes back every single year. And I love it because it's super cold hardy. Like, it will handle really cold temperatures, and it can handle a little bit of neglect. It can handle a little bit of rough housing. I don't know what the word is, but I have taken, so we're in my last house, the previous owner had grown this Egyptian walking onion, and it grew like crazy. Everywhere there was this walking onion. And so I took some with me when I moved into this new house. I left some for the new owner, and then I took some with me. And I had it in my front yard garden, then I had it in my back garden, then I had it in my herb garden, and now I have it in my greenhouse. Like, I keep just taking little pieces of it and transplanting it all over, and it handles it super well. So it definitely is a very forgiving plant. And it's very good for these colder temperatures. And then leeks are another one. Leeks are actually outside in my outdoor garden, so I'm just going to show you some footage. It's freezing outside right now, so I'm not going to go out there. They survive totally fine in the cold weather as well. Leeks generally handle like drops in temperature. They're like a good winter vegetable if you want to add one to your garden. And then there's one more here I just want to make note of. I think I've already got to 10, but there's one herb that does particularly well. I have another video on cold hardy herbs, but this one is just right in front of me. I thought I'd mention it, and that's cilantro. I have picked cilantro from like underneath the snow. So in December, I have taken the snow away from my garden when we get, those first couple of snowfalls, at least where I live. Their first few snowfalls usually in December, November maybe, but usually December. And the cilantro does totally fine. It's doing very well in my outdoor garden. It's doing very well in here. I do have a whole other video on cold hardy herbs if you want to check that out, but while I was here I thought I'd mention my cilantro, which is looking quite beautiful. If you want to watch more videos about having a winter garden or winter vegetables or anything about greenhouse gardening or anything like that, I will have a link to some related videos as well as a playlist that has lots of winter gardening videos for you to check out as well. So that is it for this week. I will see you in the next one.